She begged him to trust her. And then the very next week, she looked him dead in the eye and called him a liar. That is the whirlwind at the center of the most emotionally confusing storyline on daytime television right now. And if you have been watching it unfold, you already know the question everyone is asking. Why does the man who has done nothing but protect her keep apologizing for crimes he never committed? Why has a woman once celebrated for her work ethic and her quiet dignity suddenly been rebranded overnight as a scheming outsider with her eyes on someone else's fortune? And why does a mother's fury feel less like protection and more like a mirror reflecting her own buried history? Something is cracked open inside the Forrester mansion, and the fallout is reshaping three young lives that used to make perfect sense together. Before we go further, I want to properly welcome you. And if soap opera psychology, hidden motives, and the slow unraveling of daytime's most complicated relationships are your thing, you are exactly where you need to be. If it feels right, tap that like button, hit subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to understand why this triangle has become the most divisive storyline of the year. Because once you see what's actually happening beneath the surface, you won't watch these scenes the same way again. The names at the heart of this collapse are Electra Forrester, Will Spencer, and Melissa Dillon. Three young people who were once bound together by loyalty and now find themselves torn apart by suspicion, resentment, and a returning family member whose presence has changed everything. Electra is the niece of Ivy Forrester, brought into the family fold with warmth and welcomed as fresh blood in a dynasty that never stops needing new blood. Will is a Spencer by name, but a protector by nature. The kind of young man who absorbs pain quietly rather than inflict it on anyone else. And Dillon, sharp, hardworking, and fiercely loyal, was supposed to be the steady one in all of this. The friend who never asked for anything and never expected anything in return. So, how did these three end up here? Locked in a spiral of blame, heartbreak, and accusation that none of them seem able to escape. To understand the fracture, you have to go back to who Electra used to be. Because the woman audiences are watching now is almost unrecognizable from the girl who first walked into this story. When she arrived, there was an instant sense of sympathy surrounding her. She became entangled with Remy Price, a man whose intentions were anything but gentle, and what followed was frightening. Remy did not simply flirt or manipulate in the ordinary soap opera sense. He terrorized her. He made her feel small, hunted, music, and afraid in her own life. And it was Will who stepped into that darkness and pulled her out of it. He didn't do it for credit. He didn't do it because he wanted something from her. He did it because he saw someone drowning and he refused to let her go under. That rescue built something between them that felt for a while unbreakable. Audiences fell for Electra in that moment because she represented survival. She represented a young woman who had been through something ugly and come out the other side finally safe, finally cared for, finally seen. It was by every measure a sweet and soapy beginning. And then everything shifted, and the shift has a name. R.J. Forrester came back into the picture, and almost instantly the version of Electra we thought we knew began to dissolve. The warmth disappeared. The gratitude disappeared. What replaced it was something colder, something entitled, something that felt less like a woman finding her footing and more like a woman testing how much cruelty the people around her would absorb without pushing back. She turned her hostility toward Dillon first. And that hostility arrived with no real provocation, no real crime committed against her. Nothing except the simple fact that Will had offered Dillon a place to stay in his spare room. That single act of basic human decency, offering shelter to a friend in need, became, in Electra's mind, an unforgivable betrayal. She did not ask questions. She did not seek context. She assumed the worst, and she weaponized that assumption, turning herself into the wronged party, even as she became the one inflicting the wounds. There is a psychological read on Electra that makes all of this a little easier to untangle, even if it doesn't excuse it. Before R.J. reappeared, Electra existed in a kind of emotional vacuum. She had survived something traumatic. She had been rescued and she had been folded into the safety of a wealthy, powerful family that treated her like she belonged there unconditionally. That combination, trauma followed by sudden total security, can produce exactly the kind of behavior we're now watching unfold on screen. When a person goes from feeling unsafe to feeling untouchable almost overnight without ever processing what happened to her in between, the result is often not gratitude, it's entitlement. She never learned to sit with vulnerability because the story moved too fast to let her. One moment she was a girl being hunted by a man who terrified her, and the next she was a Forrester, insulated, protected, celebrated. RJ's return didn't create that entitlement. It simply gave her a reason to finally act on it because his presence reintroduced the old family hierarchy she'd quietly absorbed. The unspoken rule that Forrester bloodline always outranks outside loyalty, even the loyalty of the man who saved her life. This isn't the first time this show has taken a sympathetic newcomer and slowly hollowed her out into someone audiences can barely recognize. Think back to Luna Natsawa, introduced with a sympathetic backstory and a complicated mother in Poppy Natsawa, a young woman fans were initially primed to root for. Over time, that character was twisted into something almost unrecognizable from where she started. And the transformation left a lot of longtime viewers uneasy about the show's tendency to sacrifice a character's original goodness for the sake of manufactured drama. Electra's arc is following a strikingly similar shape. And there's a real argument to be made that Dylan is being maligned right now specifically to make Electra's fall from grace look smaller by comparison, to give audiences someone even less sympathetic to focus their frustration on instead. If that's the intention, it hasn't worked. Fans have simply ended up frustrated with two characters instead of one. What makes this so uncomfortable to watch is the pattern underneath it. Electra has made demands that feel less like requests from a partner and more like ultimatums from someone who believes loyalty should be unconditional and effortless, extended toward her but never required in return. She has threatened consequences over perceived slights that, when you actually examine them, amount to nothing more than Will trying to be a decent person to someone else in his life. And through it all, she has cast herself as the victim, the wounded party, the one who has been wronged, when in reality she has been the one doing the wounding. That contradiction, a person behaving like a bully while insisting she is the one under attack, is exactly why so many viewers have found themselves recoiling from a character who was originally designed to be beloved. Now, let's talk about Will, because his half of this story is just as painful to witness, maybe more so. He has been accused of things he never did. Specifically, he has been accused of leaking sensitive Spencer Company information, a betrayal that would strike at the very core of his identity and his loyalty to his own family's legacy. And he did not do it. There is no evidence that he did it. There is only Electra's willingness to believe the worst about him without proof, without investigation, without giving him the basic courtesy of the doubt that any healthy relationship requires. And yet, episode after episode, he keeps returning to her. He keeps apologizing for things that were never his fault. He keeps absorbing her anger as though it were a debt he personally owes her, when in truth, the only debt in this relationship runs in the opposite direction. There's also something worth understanding about where Will comes from, because it explains a great deal about why he absorbs pain the way he does. He was raised in the orbit of Bill Spencer, a man whose entire approach to relationships and business alike has always been built on control, manipulation, and getting what he wants, regardless of who gets hurt along the way. Growing up inside that kind of household teaches a child one of two lessons. Either you become your father, calculating and domineering, or you become his opposite out of sheer self-preservation. Someone who overcorrects so hard against manipulation that you end up unable to recognize when you're the one being manipulated. Will clearly became the second version. His gentleness isn't an accident. It's armor built specifically to avoid becoming Bill. But armor built against one kind of danger often leaves you completely exposed to another. And that's exactly what's happening here. Will spent so much energy making sure he'd never be controlling like his father that he never developed the instinct to protect himself from someone else's control. Why does he do it? Because Will is fundamentally, almost dangerously kind. He is the kind of man who mistakes his own gentleness for the cause of his pain rather than recognizing that gentleness is being exploited.